To the public, Rob Reiner and Michelle Singer's 36-year marriage looked like something out of a movie. Untouchable, picture perfect, the kind of love people point at and whisper, "That's real love." Every red carpet shot, every glowing interview, every flawless appearance painted the same story: calm, steady, and unbreakable. But behind all that shine, the truth was way heavier than it looked. Images can lie, and silence can hide a storm. For years, pressure built up quietly behind those perfect smiles. Their mansion, once full of laughter, became tense and cold. Sleepless nights, sharp words, and endless worry about their son, Nick. His struggles became their secret battle. The fights were never public, but the fear never left. Love didn't vanish, but it sure got tested again and again until it almost cracked under the weight no one could see.
I understand that the end of this movie was changed after you met Michelle.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Rob later confessed they didn't stay together because things were easy. They stayed because walking away would have shattered everything. Their children were the glue that kept them holding on when the cracks started showing. What once felt like passion turned into survival mode. Love became endurance, and endurance turned into just trying to make it through another day. So when CBS filmed Rob Reiner's final interview, something felt off right away. The confident Hollywood icon everyone knew was gone. Sitting under those bright studio lights wasn't a star. It was a man completely drained by years of quiet pain. His face carried deep lines. His eyes looked tired. His energy dimmed. It wasn't fame shining through anymore. It was pure exhaustion, the kind that comes from holding everything in for way too long.
I mean, I've been single for 10 years and I hadn't met anybody. And so I had this idea that, at that point, they run into each other after some time goes by. They have this conversation on the streets in New York. And then the last shot was going to be just the two of them walking in opposite directions. That was one of the drafts we had. And I met Michelle during the making of the movie.
The crew had no clue they were capturing what would turn out to be Rob Reiner's final confession. From the jump, Rob made it clear he wasn't there to promote a project or brag about his Hollywood legacy. "I'm here because it's time to tell the truth," he said quietly, his voice trembling just a little. And that truth? It was about his family, the side of fame nobody really saw. He talked about their house, the one magazines always called a symbol of success. Behind those spotless walls, Rob said lived years of silence so thick it felt suffocating. There were times when words just stopped altogether, when love didn't die but went completely quiet. Nights stretched on with two people living side by side but miles apart.
And, we hit it off and I thought, oh, I get it. I get what happened. I get how this works. And so we changed it. We changed the ending.
They stay together.
And the scene that you see where Billy runs in to the New Year's Eve, that speech that he gave is Billy wrote that.
Rob admitted he lost himself in the chase for perfection, directing, writing, always working, while Michelle slipped deeper into her own private world. Little by little, the warmth between them faded. Piece by piece, distance replaced closeness, until the quiet felt colder than any fight. "I thought silence meant peace," Rob said later. "Then I realized silence can also mean abandonment." That line froze the whole room. No one dared to breathe. The weight of that truth hung thick in the air. Then Rob drifted back to where it all began, the moment he met Michelle Singer on the set of When Harry Met Sally. He said that meeting changed everything for him. Funny enough, the original ending of that movie was supposed to be heartbreakingly sad, mirroring his own pain after splitting from Penny Marshall. But fate had other plans. Michelle showed up on set visiting her friend Barry Sonnenfeld, and right then, something shifted in Rob. He even laughed, remembering Barry's joke, "You're not going to marry Michelle Pfeiffer, you're going to marry my friend Michelle Singer." And Barry was right, completely right. Rob said that before Michelle, his life looked full on paper, but felt empty inside. Successful, yes, but hollow where it mattered most. When I met Michelle, he admitted, I finally understood what real love feels like. That moment didn't just change his heart, it changed his work, too. He rewrote the When Harry Met Sally ending, flipping heartbreak into hope, letting Harry and Sally find their way back to each other on New Year's Eve.
Norman Lear was the first person that got me. I mean, I was playing jacks with his daughter. Norman says to my dad, you know, this kid is really funny. My dad said, what, that kid? That kid, he's a sullen. He sits quiet. He doesn't, you know, he's not funny.
Just months later, Rob and Michelle jetted off to Hawaii, where they tied the knot in a tiny, impulsive ceremony. No guests, no press, just two random strangers signing as witnesses. We weren't just married, Rob said proudly. We were partners. Michelle grounded him, brought calm to his chaos, made him feel whole again. But what nobody realized was that even during their brightest moments, little cracks were already forming underneath all that love and laughter. Rob smiled softly as he talked about parenting their 3 kids, admitting that he was the soft one, the spoiler, the pushover dad. Michelle, though, she was the structure, the planner, the steady hand that kept the family on track. That balance held their world together for years, even when everything outside their home started spinning out of control. Michelle wasn't just my wife, Rob said quietly. She was my anchor. Then, when the talk turned to fatherhood, Rob's whole tone shifted, his voice low, almost breaking. For all the awards, fame, and applause, nothing, he said, compared to the moment he first held his kids in his arms. Rob described making a silent promise the very first time he became a dad, to always be his children's safe place, no matter how rough life got. His love wasn't loud or showy, it was the quiet kind, steady and deep, the kind that never needed words. But even the strongest balance can start to crumble. Slowly, the calm in their house turned heavy, the quiet got darker, and the family everyone thought was unbreakable began to fracture under everything they kept bottled up. The real turning point, Rob said, was when their son Nick began to change. He'd always been the brightest spark in the room, but something in his eyes shifted one night, and Rob felt it immediately. He came home late, caught a strange smell in the air, saw his son's eyes dart away. I saw it, Rob admitted softly, but I told myself it was just mood swings. Denial felt safer than panic. Then came the requests, little ones at first. Dad, can I borrow a few bucks for a movie? Or just need some cash to hang with friends. Totally normal, until they weren't. The asks started coming faster, the amounts got bigger, and soon there were no explanations at all. Behind closed doors, Rob and Michelle whispered into the night, arguing just low enough so Nick wouldn't hear. Maybe we should stop helping, Michelle urged one night, but Rob couldn't bring himself to do it. He's our son, he insisted. He needs us. Without realizing it, that love slowly turned into enabling. Their once warm, laughter-filled home started feeling unpredictable, full of tension and fear. Rob remembered nights when Nick would pound on their bedroom door, shouting in a voice that didn't even sound like him anymore. One night, everything broke. Nick shoved Rob hard against the wall, while Michelle just stood there, frozen, unable to move. I didn't see my child, Rob said, his voice trembling. Those words hung in the air like a knife. When someone asked why he never called the authorities, Rob lowered his head. Because I'm a father, he whispered. He was terrified that one phone call could destroy Nick's future, that the press would twist it, that one ugly headline would stick to his son forever. But under that fear was a deeper truth Rob could barely say out loud. Sometimes love alone isn't enough to save someone you'd give anything for. That realization shattered him. Behind closed doors, chaos became normal. Nights exploded into shouting, then ended in silence so thick it felt suffocating. Nick would storm out, leaving broken pieces behind, and Rob and Michelle would just sit there, hearts racing, afraid to even speak. The hardest part wasn't the damage, Rob said quietly. It was opening the door again, hoping again, believing again that maybe this time would be different. But when Nick returned, asking for more money, Rob finally saw it for what it was. I knew I was being used, he admitted softly. But if I refused, I'd lose him completely. That's when he said something that crushed everyone listening. It was betrayal in slow motion. Our son betrayed us, but we betrayed ourselves too. because we didn't have the strength to say stop. Fear replaced boundaries, denial replaced action, and that silence, the same one that once felt peaceful, turned into its own kind of prison. Rob never stopped loving Nick, even when that love scared him. I still saw the little boy who needed me, he confessed. But that love had changed. It was both a comfort and a curse, a light that guided him and a chain that kept him trapped. The harder they tried to protect their son, the more their family quietly fell apart. Rob and Michelle slowly started to drift apart under the crushing weight of everything. Late nights turned into long, wordless stares, and every talk felt like running in circles. There was no big explosion, no dramatic ending, just years of quiet exhaustion eating away at what they had built together. Love, once their biggest strength, turned into the root of their deepest pain. What hurt most, Rob said softly, was the illusion. Everyone else saw perfect photos, wide smiles, and glittering parties. They thought that was real. But behind those doors, peace didn't live there anymore. Every argument always led back to the same thing, their children. Not out of hate, but from love expressed in two totally different ways. Michelle wanted order, rules, and accountability. Rob, he just wanted to hold his family together no matter what it cost him. Michelle pushed for Nick to face reality, to take responsibility. But Rob couldn't bear the idea of losing his son, not after everything they'd already been through. One night, it all boiled over. "We can't live like this anymore," Michelle said quietly. Rob just froze, terrified that one wrong word might push her completely away. Their fights weren't screaming matches. They were whispered breakdowns at midnight, standing barefoot in the kitchen, both of them too tired to cry. Then came the question that sliced straight through him. Michelle looked at Rob and asked, "Are you protecting our child, or your idea of being a good father?" The silence afterward felt endless. Finally, Rob whispered, "If I let go, I lose him." That single sentence changed everything. It drew a line between them, a quiet, invisible wall that never really came down again. And after that night, things only got worse. Everything spiraled after one terrible incident when Nick caused serious trouble, the kind they couldn't hide anymore. Michelle, shaking with anger and heartbreak, grabbed the phone with trembling hands. "I'm calling the police," she said through tears. Rob stepped in front of her immediately, his voice cracking as he begged, "Don't, please, he's our son." Michelle broke down right there, not out of fear, but out of pure emotional exhaustion. "You're choosing him," she said, her voice shaking, "and leaving me behind." The whole room went still, thick with silence that felt impossible to breathe through. Rob didn't even try to deny it. "I love you," he whispered, "but I love our child too, and I don't know how to keep from losing you both." That night nearly tore their world apart. Divorce wasn't just hinted at, it was spoken out loud. Suitcases were pulled from the closet, then shoved back in after long, tearful hours. Rob later admitted that was the first moment he truly believed their family might not make it. Not because love had vanished, but because it was dragging them in two different directions. "We didn't fight over fame or money," Rob confessed. "We fought over the children we loved more than anything." Michelle demanded order, structure, and safety. Rob clung to protection, refusing to give up on his son no matter what it cost him. "I couldn't bear to see my boy in handcuffs," he said quietly. But Michelle's reply hit like a blade, "And I can't live in fear anymore." Both of them were right, and that's what made it unbearable. Rob chose silence instead of confrontation, thinking that maybe, if he just stayed quiet, he could hold the family together a little longer. "Maybe," he admitted softly, "I was just stretching the pain instead of ending it." Their marriage didn't fall apart in one blow. It eroded slowly, piece by piece, like water wearing down stone. To the outside world, they still looked picture perfect, but behind those walls, the damage was already done. They still looked perfect. Every photo, every smile, every glossy magazine cover screamed happily ever after. Rob said people believed the image completely. Happiness doesn't mean there aren't cracks, he admitted softly. It means seeing them and still trying to stay. Then he paused for a long moment, his voice barely holding together. But everything has a price, he whispered, and I don't know if we paid it the right way. And it wasn't just about Nick anymore. Their other children, Jake and Roy, carried their own quiet struggles, the kind that never made headlines but cut just as deep. When Rob spoke about them, his tone was calm but heavy, like a man replaying years of regret in his head. Jake grew up comfortable, Rob said, maybe too comfortable. He's smart, brilliant actually, but not driven. Every time Rob thought he was ready to step up, something always got in the way. Not ready yet, not the right time, the world's too hard. Excuses that sounded logical in the moment, but they piled up over the years until they became walls. I kept telling myself he'd grow up eventually, Rob confessed quietly, but eventually never came. That realization stayed with him like a scar he couldn't shake. Then came Roy, different energy altogether, loud, confident, always determined to get her way. What started as tiny requests soon turned into something bigger, rent help, then short-term loans, then never-ending financial support that quietly drained them both. Michelle didn't always argue about it. She didn't have to. Her eyes said it all. Frustration, worry, and heartbreak mixed together. Their Brentwood home, once a sanctuary full of warmth and laughter, started to feel colder, more like a symbol of everything complicated about love, loyalty, and family. It wasn't money or fame breaking them anymore. It was the invisible weight of trying to fix what love alone couldn't hold together. And when Roy finally said she didn't feel safe living so far away, it hit Michelle hard. Another reminder that even in their perfect world, something had gone very, very wrong. Rob folded instantly. He always did. Roy didn't just ask for help this time. She demanded it. A house right next door. Private, elegant, perfectly comfortable. Michelle was furious. Are we helping her or are we just hurting her more? She asked sharply. Rob had no answer, only guilt weighing him down. In the end, he gave in again. I just couldn't stand the thought of my daughter being unhappy, he admitted. And soon Jake stayed too, caught in the same loop. Grown kids living close, but never really growing up. Their once bustling home turned eerily quiet, too soft, too calm, too empty. We'd sit at dinner and no one would talk, Rob said. I'd look at my kids and wonder, do they even want their own lives anymore? But what really broke him wasn't their dependence. It was the look in Michelle's eyes. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just whispered, "Once, we're running out." Rob never asked what she meant, money or faith, because deep down he already knew.
He later admitted that somewhere along the way he chose giving over guiding, pleasing over parenting. I was so afraid of losing my children, Rob said softly, but in the end, I lost myself. Every demand, every compromise chipped away at him piece by piece, yet he couldn't bring himself to stop. He thought love meant saying yes, when sometimes love means knowing when to say no. When the interviewer asked if he regretted it all, Rob went silent for a long moment. Then, with his eyes fixed on the floor, he nodded. I regret thinking I had time, he finally said. Families don't fall apart because of one big moment. They fall apart from 1,000 tiny ones, the ones we let slide. And then, for the first time during that entire interview, Rob looked straight into the camera. His eyes were tired, but there was a strange clarity there, the kind that only comes when you finally stopped lying to yourself. Rob's voice dropped low, almost like he was talking straight to Michelle through the camera. "If you're watching," he said softly, "I understand now. I just understood too late." The studio went completely still. No crew movement, no whispers, not even the sound of someone breathing. That silence hit harder than any music ever could. It was raw, heavy, final. No one there realized it at the time, but they were witnessing Rob Reiner's final appearance on screen.
Later, CBS aired the full conversation again as a tribute. No edits, no added narration, no dramatic effects, just Rob sitting under those cold studio lights, stripped of everything but truth. He wasn't the confident Hollywood icon anymore. He was just a man who lived, lost, and finally faced himself. Near the end of that footage, a behind-the-scenes moment quietly played. Rob turned to the interviewer and asked, almost in a whisper, "Do you think my family will be happy?" The man paused, unsure, careful, before finally answering, "Happiness will come." Rob nodded slowly, closed his eyes, and exhaled like he was finally setting something down that had been crushing him for years. When that broadcast aired, people didn't tune in out of curiosity. They watched in disbelief. Rob and Michelle had always been the example of love in Hollywood, grounded, loyal, the couple that had supposedly made it through it all. Seeing the truth behind those polished smiles shocked millions. Viewers flooded social media, saying they couldn't even finish it in one sitting, not because it was overly dramatic, but because it was real. Rob didn't sound like a celebrity trying to protect an image. He sounded like a father still wrestling with his heart, and that's what made it haunting. He wasn't performing, he was confessing. Sometimes tragedy doesn't crash in from the outside. Sometimes it grows slowly, quietly, inside the homes we trust the most. The media called it Rob Reiner's final confession, but for millions who watched, it felt more like a mirror, a painful reminder that even the strongest families can break in silence. It felt like a quiet cry for help, one that came far, far too late. And then came the 14th, just 1 month after that haunting interview. Everything collapsed in a single, heartbreaking moment. The news spread like an electric shock across the country. The same family everyone thought had finally found peace was suddenly gone, just like that. Rob and Michelle were discovered inside their home, and within minutes, the entire nation was in disbelief. But what stunned people even more was what came next. Their son, Nick, the very child Rob had spent his entire life protecting, was identified as the one responsible. Every single fear Rob had carried for years, every nightmare he had tried to keep from becoming real, all hit at once in the most brutal way imaginable. The silence he had chosen out of love ended up being the very thing that destroyed everything he'd ever tried to protect. Clips from that final CBS interview flooded every screen. His words echoed everywhere. "I was afraid of losing my child." Suddenly, those lines didn't sound like reflection. They sounded like a goodbye. People couldn't stop watching, replaying his every sentence, now realizing it was a warning he never knew he was given. "If there was still time," he had said softly, and that phrase hit millions right in the heart. The time had been there, but no one had faced it. In an instant, their flawless public image shattered. That once perfect family portrait, smiling, polished, timeless, stopped being inspiring and became something haunting instead. News anchors, fans, and neighbors all asked the same chilling question. How many homes looked just like that? Families smiling for the cameras while quietly falling apart behind closed doors. And maybe that's what made it all so terrifying, not just the ending itself, but the slow, invisible years that led up to it. The cracks had been there all along, hidden behind laughter, love, and silence, until silence was all that was left. Years and years where love, fear, and denial tangled so tightly together that no one could tell them apart anymore. Rob's love for his son wasn't just deep, it was unconditional, painfully unconditional. It blinded him, trapped him, and in the end, wiped out everything he'd tried so hard to protect. What happened stopped being just a Hollywood tragedy. It became a warning about what love can turn into when it has no boundaries, when silence starts taking the place of action. But to really understand the full weight of it all, you have to look at Michelle, the woman who stood quietly at the center of that storm. Michelle Singer was never just a famous man's wife. She was her own force, a respected photographer, producer, and activist with a story powerful enough to stand on its own. Born in New York City, Michelle grew up in a close Jewish family built on survival and strength. Her mother had lived through unthinkable pain during World War II, starting from nothing, and that resilience shaped every part of who Michelle became. She learned early that silence can be dangerous and that truth, no matter how uncomfortable, always matters. That belief burned in her. It showed up in everything she touched. Michelle was fluent in French and Spanish and chased her creative dreams at the School of Visual Arts in New York, where she studied photography like it was oxygen. Her early career wasn't glamorous. Long days hauling heavy gear, setting up lights, watching others take credit for work she helped shape. But that grind taught her how to really see people. Not the surface, not the image, but the emotion underneath. Her camera became her voice, her weapon, her way of showing truth in a world obsessed with appearances. By the mid-1980s, her freelance photos started catching attention from big-name magazines. Editors couldn't ignore her perspective. She captured faces stripped of performance, beauty mixed with vulnerability, truth without filters. Michelle didn't just take pictures, she revealed people.
That ability, that drive to see what others hid, would later become the very thing that defined her, and the thing that broke her heart the most when the life she built started to unravel behind closed doors. Michelle's career hit a turning point when she photographed the cover for The Art of the Deal, a project she would later say she openly regretted. Still, it cemented her reputation in the photography world, putting her name on the map. But then, fate stepped in. It was 1989 when everything changed. Michelle was visiting her friend Barry Sonnenfeld on the set of When Harry Met Sally, and that's where she crossed paths with director Rob Reiner. Rob had just come out of a difficult chapter in his life, still raw and finding his footing. The moment he saw Michelle across that buzzing film set, he couldn't look away. Barry, ever the joker, teased him, "You're not going to marry Michelle Pfeiffer?" And then came the line that would change both their lives forever. "You're going to marry my friend Michelle Singer." And unbelievably, he was right. Their connection was instant, real, magnetic, and unstoppable. Within just a few months, Rob and Michelle were standing barefoot on a Hawaiian beach, saying their vows in a tiny, spontaneous ceremony with only 2 strangers as witnesses. One elderly woman even recognized Rob that day and told him she loved the Princess Bride. It was such a small, random moment, but it perfectly captured the heart of their bond. Simple, unexpected, and full of joy. Michelle didn't just step into Rob's life, she completely changed its direction. Her creativity and strength reshaped him as a man, and even as a filmmaker. When Harry Met Sally was originally written with a sad, lonely ending, but after falling for Michelle, Rob rewrote it. Suddenly, Harry and Sally found their way back to each other. Hope replaced heartbreak, both on screen and in his real life. For the next 36 years, Rob and Michelle became one of Hollywood's most admired couples, not just because of their love, but because of the way they worked together. They weren't just husband and wife, they were teammates, creative partners, and fierce allies with a shared purpose. Together, they raised 3 children, Jake, born in 1991, Nick in 1993, and Roy in 1997. Building what looked, from the outside, like a picture-perfect life. Behind the scenes, Michelle was the quiet storm that kept everything and everyone steady. Rob often said she was the engine behind it all, the reason every dream they chased actually came to life. And her career proved it over and over again. Michelle co-founded Reiner Light,
then went on to serve as co-chair of Castle Rock Entertainment, producing hit projects like Shock and Awe, Albert Brooks' Defending My Life, Rachel, and God and Country. She even continued her work on Spinal Tap 2, set for release in 2025, proof that her creative spark never dimmed. In 2020, she and Rob signed a major deal with Warner Brothers Television, a move that officially cemented their legacy as one of Hollywood's most intentional storytelling teams. But Michelle wasn't just about art or entertainment. She had fire in her when it came to justice. She co-founded the American Foundation for Equal Rights, the organization that helped strike down Proposition 8 and pushed marriage equality forward across the United States. She fought fiercely for early childhood education, championed funding for schools, and worked side by side with the Innocence Project, doing everything she could to help overturn wrongful convictions. Whenever Michelle saw injustice, she didn't just talk about it, she showed up. Michelle showed up fully every single time, Rob once said with pride. She's the force behind everything we do. He called her his true north, the one who reminded him what actually mattered when Hollywood noise got too loud. When I met her, Rob said softly in an interview, I finally understood what real love feels like. And years later, Michelle echoed that same truth in her own words, saying simply, it just felt right. Together, they weren't just partners, they were proof that love could build empires, fight injustice, and still stay human. Michelle's drive, her compassion, her refusal to stay silent, that was what made her unforgettable. We fell in love instantly, Rob had once said, his voice filled with awe. Friends described Michelle as brilliant, compassionate, unstoppable, a woman who somehow balanced fierce creativity with deep conscience. Together, Rob and Michelle built more than a marriage. They built a mission, a partnership rooted not in fame or image, but in purpose. To everyone watching from the outside, they looked unshakable, like nothing could ever break them. Then came December 14th, 2025. Everything stopped. Their story, the one so many admired, was suddenly frozen in a way no one could have imagined. Michelle and Rob were discovered inside their Brentwood home, and the shock spread through Hollywood and beyond like wildfire. Within hours, the headlines turned heartbreaking. Their son, Nick, was taken into custody in connection with what happened. The silence that followed was heavy. Too heavy. When CBS later re-aired Rob's interview, it hit completely differently. Viewers didn't see a Hollywood director anymore. They saw a father who had spent his entire life trying to hold his family together. Every word now carried a weight that felt unbearable. What once sounded reflection now felt like a message, a warning, left behind in real time. Rob's voice didn't sound dramatic, it sounded real, human, tired. His story wasn't meant to shock the world, it was meant to show it something, to remind people that behind perfect smiles and glamorous photos, so many families are quietly fighting battles no one ever sees. That love, when it has no boundaries, and silence, when it replaces truth, can slowly become the very thing that destroys what it's trying to protect. Rob never spoke out for attention. He spoke because he couldn't let silence win anymore, even if his understanding came too late. He wanted honesty. He wanted the truth to be seen, no matter how painful. And that truth didn't fade when the cameras turned off. It stayed with everyone who watched long after the screen went dark. So if this story hit you, if it made you think, feel, or even question, don't let it disappear into silence. Like, share, comment, and subscribe to keep stories like this alive, because sometimes the truth we face together can be the one that finally sets us free.